Once again, it's Friday, and once again, as if on cue, this presidential race has been rocked by another head-scratching, reality-bending, M. Night Shyamalan-worthy plot twist. We're, of course, talking about the FBI's announcement today that it is revisiting its investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. Late this morning, FBI Director James Comey sent a letter to the Senate Judiciary Committee saying new emails have been discovered that, quote, appear pertinent to the investigation that his agency suggested it had wrapped up last month when it declined to recommend charges against the Democratic presidential nominee. The new messages, which the New York Times is now reporting were discovered during an unrelated investigation into Anthony Weiner, the husband of longtime Clinton aide Huma Abedin, will now be reviewed by the FBI to determine whether they contain any classified information. Soon after the news broke, a very gleeful Donald J. Trump stepped on stage at his rally in Manchester, New Hampshire, and he let it rip.
We must not let her take her criminal scheme into the Oval Office. I have great respect for the fact that the FBI and the Department of Justice are now willing to have the courage to right the horrible mistake that they made. This is bigger than Watergate. This is bigger than Watergate, in my opinion.
Conservatives have been going wild over this news from the moment that Congressman Jason Chaffetz first tweeted that the FBI investigation was, quote, case reopened. Mr. Limbaugh, take it away.
Hot damn. This investigation will not conclude by the time of the election, folks. What, you think it will? No, it can't. This election cannot possibly conclude by a week from Tuesday. Do they come from WikiLeaks? As the WikiLeaks dump shown emails that Comey didn't have? Are there emails the FBI didn't get, didn't see, didn't find? Where do these emails come from? The Clinton campaign is going to be livid over this. They thought they had this slam dunked and put away.
So, what did Hillary Clinton have to say about the big breaking news today?
Let me say a word about the recent flooding here in Cedar Rapids.
Okay, she actually didn't say anything today about the email or about the FBI or James Comey, but her campaign chairman did. In a statement, John Podesta, the aforementioned chairman, said, quote, already we have seen characterizations that the FBI is reopening an investigation, but Comey's words do not match that characterization. Director Comey's letter refers to emails that have come to light in an unrelated case, but we have no idea what those emails are, and the director himself notes they may not even be significant. It is extraordinary that we would see something like this just 11 days out from a presidential election. The director owes it to the American people to immediately provide the full details of what he is now examining, end quote. So, Mark, the details that John Podesta is talking about are still emerging. We are in a state of limited information, but real information. On a scale of 1 to Godzilla plus, where does this rank politically?
For the next 24 hours minimum, it's Godzilla plus. I have no idea whether it will affect the race. Without a doubt, it will inspire Republicans, depress Democrats. Well, we need more facts. What we do know is James Comey, I've been saying this since he had his famous press statement, public statement last month. James Comey is getting horrible advice. He is interfering in this election. He is responding to Congress. Congress has no business knowing about the closing and opening of criminal probes. I don't understand what the guy's doing, but just from pure political point of view, it is a nightmare for the Clinton administration, the Clinton campaign. I know why they're upset. They should be, but they shouldn't have put all their eggs in the Comey basket. The chickens are coming home to roost. How's that for some poultry metaphor? Yeah. I don't understand what Comey's doing. That's my main thought about all this.
Poultry poetry. Look, I don't know about eggs and baskets. I will affirm and attest for the sake of the public record that you have been, in every instance, critical of James Comey, not just a month ago, but throughout this entire thing. You've criticized Comey throughout. So, and there have been times when I've agreed with you, times I've agreed with you less. On this, at this moment, it does seem like we have a problem with the FBI director. And I actually think that whether you are a Democrat or Republican, if you were just looking at this on the merits, you would agree with the one thing that John Podesta said, which is that James Comey should come out And
The Republicans agree with that.
And stand in
You
front,
need to say more.
And stand in front of a podium and explain what the hell you're doing
But
here.
he can't, because he can't talk about a criminal probe.
Again,
it's ridiculous.
For there to be accountability here, I believe he must clarify what this is about. Now, again, we don't know. Right now, if it's true that this is about Anthony Weiner, it makes sense, right? Houmet Abedin may have sent Anthony Weiner emails. This is obviously related to his sexual texting to an underage girl in North Carolina. If that's the investigation, that is a federal crime because it crosses state lines. It makes sense for the FBI to be looking at it. But it could be significant politically in the sense that, as you know, and we've talked about before, Donald Trump has been criticizing Hillary Clinton for trusting Houmet Abedin, and has suggested in the past that there might be an issue here with classified material getting out through her. So this is potentially politically very significant, or it could be nothing.
Yeah, let's listen to Donald Trump as Nostradamus practically predicting Anthony Weiner's role in this campaign. Oh, don't have that. In any event, as you said, for my dramatic intro, Donald Trump talks all the time about how Anthony Weiner Hillary Clinton can't be trusted because Anthony Weiner would have access to her emails. I will say this. Right now, I don't know what James Comey's doing. I don't know if he's watching our program, if he's on vacation for the weekend, but to drop this, look, Congress is interested in this. It's possible that the reason he sent them the letter is because he made a deal with them. I will keep you informed on all developments. This is not the way the Justice Department is supposed to work. This is a case of great public interest. I get that. But you're not supposed to be trying cases in public like this.
He has been hammered, obviously, mostly by Republicans because he exonerated
and now by the Democrats.
But again, if you think about the history here, right, he did what he did. He said that there could be no criminal prosecution against Hillary Clinton, that didn't meet the standard. Republicans have criticized him like crazy. He's not being criticized by that many Republicans. Donald Trump today was singing the praises of the FBI all of a sudden for having done this.
Well, but they're demanding he do more.
There is clearly some element, or at least the suspicion, at least, that there's some element of CYA going on here with James Comey. But it is so irresponsible.
11 days before the election.
Irresponsible. To
the question to me now,
unless there's a very good reason that we don't know about.
All right, now let's listen to Donald Trump foreshadowing the Weiner matter.
Yeah. Why are these people with great knowledge of the inner workings of our country and our security, why are they giving Hillary Clinton briefings? Because it's going to get revealed. I mean, her number one person, Houmet Abedin, is married to Anthony Weiner, who's a sleazeball and a pervert. And I'm not saying that. I mean, that's recorded history, right? I don't like Houmet going home at night and telling Anthony Weiner all of these secrets.
But what about the fact that Houmet Abedin, who knows every single thing about Hillary Clinton, she knows more about Hillary than Hillary knows, and she's married to a pervert sleaze named Anthony Weiner, who will send anything that he has out over Twitter or any other form of getting it out?
So I'll say again, the biggest issue to me is what does Comey do next? I cannot believe he will be silent for 11 days. It's unfathomable. But the other thing is, when or what will cause this not to be the lead story in the news? Look, because as long as it is, it's not good for Hillary Clinton.
There have been reports that there are thousands, as there would be, thousands upon thousands of emails here for the FBI to comb through. The idea that this is going to be resolved one way or the other before Election Day, I don't know what would be worse, if it was resolved now before Election Day or not. Either one of them is horrible, right?
I think Comey could come out today and say, oh, by the way, this doesn't have anything to do with an investigation of Hillary Clinton.
Well, he could, but even then it would be an investigation of Anthony Weiner and Houmet Abedin. So, look, it seems to me that the question that I almost most want to know is why could this not have waited until the day after Election Day? This is a perfectly legitimate inquiry to be
the only thing I can think of is that he promised the Senate Judiciary Committee, to whom he wrote this letter,
right,
if there are new developments in the case, I will tell them to you. But why he would make such a promise is beyond me. There's so many potential investigations and ongoing probes that the Hill is interested in. Yeah. They're not entitled to a minute-by-minute, timely play-by-play of any possible development.
Right. Well,
they're just not. That's not the way the system works.
Well, and I think you could have an interesting debate about the question of whether such a promise to the Judiciary Committee, even if made, would supersede the questions at stake here in the entire election. It's 11 days to Election Day. This is an extraordinary. I mean, it's just to drop anything at this point if you don't have a firm case. to make is irresponsible.
All right, Donald Trump's campaign manager and attorney, Kellyanne Conway, will join us later in the show. She's an attorney, not Trump's attorney. But first, we're going to talk about these latest dramatic developments with two campaign reporters after these words from our sponsors.
With us now to dissect the fallout at this hour from the FBI director's incredibly vague and potentially really important letter about Hillary Clinton's email. Actually, not Hillary Clinton's email, about some email somewhere. Today are two reporters on the campaign trail. MSNBC political correspondent Casey Hunt is in the nation's capital, and NBC News correspondent Katie Tur, who's covering Trump today in Iowa, joins us from Cedar Rapids. I want to start with you, Casey. The Clinton campaign's reaction to this in the immediate hours afterwards has been what? Beyond John Podesta's statement.
Essentially to get very angry privately about the way this has happened, the timing of it. I think the thing that stuck out to me in his statement, and that has stuck out to me in conversations with Democrats across the board, is how much people are willing now to question FBI Director James Comey. I think, you know, there was some grumbling privately over the summer when he held that press conference and had some pretty difficult things to say, even though he ultimately cleared her of wrongdoing. So they were on the one hand happy about that, not so happy about the way he characterized it, but they were willing to kind of keep their mouths shut publicly. This time, they're really questioning him in a way that I think is pretty significant.
Katie, I'll ask you the same question I just asked Casey. Obviously, you know, in the same way that John Podesta put out an outrage statement, there's obviously a bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes. Donald Trump obviously gloating right now. What else is going on in Trump world at this hour?
The campaign could not be more ecstatic about this news. This is a welcome distraction for them. There were questionable headlines this morning about how much money Donald Trump was going to be donating to his campaign and how committed he was in this final stretch. Nobody is talking about that anymore. Now they're talking about this FBI investigation. Donald Trump is hammering that on the campaign trail. He talked about it. It was the first thing he talked about it when he landed in New Hampshire. We assume it's going to be the first thing he talks about when he gets to Maine, and he got a roaring reaction from the crowd there. They believe that this is something that, if it doesn't get more voters into their tent, it will muddy the waters enough to make those on the fence about Hillary Clinton not go out into the polls. I was just talking to Michael Steele, and I asked him, is this, I guess, the happiest day the GOP has had in some time? And he laughed and he said, yeah, it is. But what state of the race is this if this is what it takes for Donald Trump to have a good day on the campaign trail? So while they are very ecstatic about this news internally and obviously very publicly, there are some questions surrounding just how helpful it'll be down the line.
Casey, we're all trying to adjust to what happens next, and it's hard to remember what was going to happen before this exploded. Where is Hillary Clinton now? Where is she for the next 48 hours? Where might she be forced to respond to this?
Well, she is continuing with the plan that they had before, which was, she's been riding high. The level of confidence that you've seen from her on the campaign trail as she's interacted with the reporters who cover her, it's if you once covered the Hillary Clinton who didn't really get along with the press, it's a little bit of a remarkable shift in attitude, or at least it was until this. And so as of now, the plan is they're continuing. They're supposed to campaign in Florida over the weekend, Ohio on Monday. There was a little bit of fanfare actually as the plane was landing. Right before the plane learned about this new information, Jen Palmieri was talking about how they were going to go into Arizona, a big push into a red state that they now actually think that they can win. And then, they landed and everybody realized that this is now something that is likely to be at least a piece of the conversation for the next 11 days or almost 10 days now that we have left of this election. So I think the question is going to be, when does Hillary Clinton, does she at all take questions about this going forward? I think, you've seen the aggressive posture that John Podesta took. I would imagine that if she was going to talk to reporters, it would be similar. But I think, this really changes the tenor, has the potential to change the tenor of the final days of this race. I'm still not convinced that it's enough, because to a certain extent, this is something voters had already digested. Her honest and trustworthy numbers are already pretty difficult. It's not as though we've seen a fundamental shift there. We've seen voters kind of go into her camp or decide that she's going to be their person without telling pollsters, hey, actually, we do trust her after all. So I'm not sure that it will fundamentally change it, but, you never know.
Katie Tur, is Donald Trump going to change his schedule or do anything different as far as we know?
We have no indication that he's going to. He's going to be here in Iowa tonight after it gets done with Maine. Then he'll be in Colorado tomorrow, also Nevada over the weekend. They are focusing on a handful of states, the ones that they need to win. States like Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, obviously, where Hillary Clinton might end up going. But I don't think they're going to change their tune. It will be interesting to find out if Donald Trump actually has a gaggle of his own now. He hasn't had one since the middle of the Democratic National Convention. So we'll find out if he decides that it's okay to stand in front of reporters and take questions. Remember, he's been avoiding doing this ever since well, for a while now, but certainly since the allegations and the accusations from those female accusers surfaced. So we're going to find out if he feels comfortable going on and taking questions now, given these new allegations. But again, they really want to try and use this to their advantage. They want to try and take this for all that they can. He's just spent $10 million, or said he's put $10 million into his campaign. We're told that that's going to go to battleground TV ads. This certainly gives them some new messaging if they haven't already shot those ads. And again, this is an enthusiasm battle between Donald Trump supporters and Hillary Clinton supporters. They believe that if they can turn out everyone from their base and get every single one of them to their polls, while at the same time making Hillary Clinton less palatable, they really have a chance. But I would note this, and this is something that's going to get buried in today's news. Hillary Clinton has been having, and her surrogates have been having, campaign events around the corner from polling stations. They've been really hammering the get out the vote early efforts. Donald Trump has not been doing the same thing. We go to event after event, and there aren't those tables that you see at the Clinton events where volunteers are directing people to where their polling station is and encouraging them to send in their early ballots. Occasionally we'll see volunteers in these lime green t-shirts, but usually they're just standing in the crowd and taking in the rally like everybody else. We very rarely see them talking to anybody or holding a clipboard or anything like that. So the Clinton team does have that advantage in getting out the vote early. And Donald Trump hasn't taken advantage of that. And they also were talking about how they have all these new first-time voters in their camp, but it doesn't seem like they're doing absolutely everything they possibly can to make sure each and every one of them gets to the polls, knows how to get to the polls, and casts their ballot for Donald Trump.
Katie, thank you. Casey, one quick question. Is it true that Hillary Clinton flies around on a plane with no Wi-Fi?
It's not quite true. It's almost true. The Wi-Fi is, in theory, corporate go-go, but it doesn't quite work as well as, say, Delta go-go, which I'm sure you guys use all the time. It is spotty. Nick Merrill, the traveling press secretary, has very serious pet peeves about reporters putting more than one device on the internet at any given time. Frankly, it just doesn't work that well. You just never know if you're going to have internet or not.
That is a crazy, crazy thing. Yeah. Katie Tur, Casey Hunt, thank you both.
All right, we're going to stay on this story, and we're going to talk to Donald Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, in just a bit, as well as a Democratic voice and a never-Trump Republican. We'll be right back with all of that. We're joined now by Republican strategist and former director of Jeb Bush's super PAC Right to Rise. That would be Mike Murphy. And with us from Washington, D.C., that would be Matt Bennett, the senior vice president for the group Third Way and a former deputy assistant to President Bill Clinton. Mike, I'm going to start with you. It's obviously, we'll always say it here, you are a Republican, but you are also not a Trump lover, let's put it that way.
That is
which
true.
is to say you're more of a Trump hater. So sitting where you look right now at this hour, just give us a sense of what you think the political implications of the Comey announcement is today.
Well, there's almost nothing as bad in the last 10, 11 days of the campaign than hearing you're going to be on the front page connected to Anthony Weiner. I mean, so...
And then an FBI investigation.
In an FBI investigation. So it's almost like this was created to be an awful time for Hillary Clinton. It's going to grab everything for a couple of days. And the question is, the campaign will demand this to not be as murky, and it's going to go in one of two ways. I think the Clinton campaign should be careful about digging in and picking wars with the FBI, bury Weiner, and see. I thought the Podesta statement was a little defensive, but as far as Trump is concerned, If he was Jeb Bush, he'd go from 4 points to 5 points ahead off this. He's still got all the Trump problems.
But you said the Podesta statement was a little defensive. I just want to ask you this: like, do you think that calling for Comey to come out and clarify is the right thing to do or not?
Yes, I do. But some of the language about suspicious 11 days, I would not go the paranoia route against the FBI.
Matt, if Comey doesn't come out and clarify, should the Clinton campaign keep this up, or should they try to change the subject?
They're not going to be able to change the subject, at least for a couple of days. But I'm with you. Hashtag I'm with Mark. I think this was outrageous. And I think Podesta's statement was tough. And I think they have a duty not only to their candidate, but to the 20 million people who have already voted and to the hundreds of millions more that are going to vote, to demand answers ahead of Election Day. This is ridiculous.
But Matt, investigations, I mean, look, I made clear what I think of what Comey did, but investigations don't work that way. It takes time. They can't say we're going to have the answers on a schedule before Election Day.
Right, but they can say what is and isn't within the scope of the investigation. What we know now is pure speculation. There's some reporters with inside sources of the Justice Department. Some say it's 3 emails, some say it's thousands. I mean, everyone is just running around chasing their tail because Comey provided almost no details. You're right that he can't be definitive about what is or isn't going to come of the investigation, but he can tell us a little bit about what they're looking for and what they're looking at.
So, if it's right that that the reporting is what the reporting suggests is that none of this has to do with any emails sent from, this has nothing to do with Hillary Clinton's personal server, right? Right. If that is true, and this is obviously not a great story for the Clinton campaign in any way, right? But given the polarization in the country, given how dug in the partisans are here, is this the kind of thing you think that could actually move the needle in terms of how the race is unfolding, the dynamic between now and Election Day?
Well, if over the next 48 hours, as we learn more, it becomes more compartmentalized like that hypothesis, then I think it'll be more of a tactical distraction than a big shakeup. The issue is this race needs a atomic-sized shakeup for Donald Trump to get out of the cul-de-sac he's in demographically, and I can't rule it out now because it's still very murky, but I would be surprised if this evolves that big in 72 hours.
All right. Matt Bennett, Mike Murphy, stick around, stay in your seats, and wherever you are, just hold on. So we're going to talk to you more about this story and other things to do with this race when we come back. If you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. As I said, we will be right back with these guys. We're back with Republican strategist Mike Murphy and Matt Bennett, the senior vice president for the Democratic group Third Way, former deputy assistant to President Bill Clinton. I want to come back to the topic we were discussing just now. Matt, I'm going to ask you, one of the realities of this race has always been Hillary Clinton has an issue with trustworthiness. No Republicans trust her at all, and many Democrats have problems with her honesty and trustworthiness, right? Is there some way in which the fact that she is widely distrusted could actually be a benefit to her in this circumstance, which is to say so much of this is already priced into the stock when it comes to Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, and I think ultimately I agree with Mike that this is probably not going to be a giant meteor that crashes into this race, because unless something criminal emerges, soon, everyone already has their position staked out when it comes to the email situation. Democrats have accepted it. They don't love it, and they've moved on. The Clinton haters hate her, and I don't think a lot of swing voters are sitting around thinking, if there was one more shoe to drop on the email scandal, then that might push me towards Trump. I just don't think in the end it's going to have a huge impact.
Mike, talk about how polling works, right? So in the Clinton campaign, they do a lot of data, and they were feeling pretty good. We got a 6, 7, 8-point lead. We're looking good. So now we're going into a weekend.
Right. That'll be very bad.
How soon, if you're Hillary Clinton and you're demanding to know, is this hurting me, how soon could they give her data?
They could give her data in 24 hours, but they could give her good data by Monday. Takes a little while to get some of the harder to find people, both in polling and in other analytics they want to do. So 48 hours is a better footprint, but they're going to feel it. The Democratic Party tends to be a little more panicky in their inside world than our guys do, for whatever cultural reasons. So they're going to feel that. The other loose variable in all this is Trump was a dying campaign 24 hours ago. This is a huge shot of adrenaline to them. The question is, what does Trump do? Now, if Kellyanne, in my view, should hood him like a falcon and get out of the way of this thing, doubt that'll happen. Yeah. So he will do something which could make it worse for him in the next 48 hours. So this is the beginning of this.
Matt, if you were going into the field with a poll right now, besides the horse race, would you ask questions about this topic? And if so, what would they be?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you would have to ask questions about this topic.
So what would you ask?
You would say, if you learned that the FBI had, using the words the Republicans are using, reopened the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails and involved Anthony. I mean, you would spin it as horribly as you possibly could, because that's what the Republicans are going to be doing. And while I agree with Mike, you don't get good data for 48 hours. The other thing is, there is going to be a cumulative effect of the messaging that we're going to hear from Kellyanne and we're going to hear from Trump over the course of the next 2 days, and that can have a ripple effect, into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we don't know how bad this is going to be probably till midweek.
One of the things I most like about you, Mike, is you kind of analyze this race always in terms of available vote. Like, who's out there? What's the universe of potential voters who are left out there still making up their decision whether they're going to stay home or go to the polls, and who they would go to the polls for if they went.
Right.
For those voters that now exist in that universe right now,
right.
Donald Trump, who we just showed tape of, calling Anthony Weiner a pervert and whatever. He has some issues making that kind of argument.
Yeah, there is a great irony of Trump going on the offense on creepy sexual behavior.
Right. So if that's where this all lands, Anthony Weiner, right? Yeah. Is Donald Trump in a position to make that argument in an effective way for the available universe of voters?
I'm dubious. I think Trump is always well equipped to hurt somebody. He just can never fix himself. So will this cause people who don't like Hillary because they can't trust her to think less of her? Probably. But will it change what those college-educated Caucasian voters think about Donald Trump, particularly women, particularly the way he's trying to outbid now the Clinton campaign on these sexual attacks? I think it's a big lift 11 days out.
So, Matt, a lot of the coverage of this week before today was framed by the ABC News tracking poll, which showed Clinton with a 13-point lead. Today, the tracking poll comes out, it's a 4-point lead. We asked my former colleague Gary Langer, who does the poll, why that is. He says the difference is because of a slight rise in the share of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents who are emerging as likely voters, as well as consolidation amongst Republicans. If you're Hillary Clinton or John Podesta, what do you think about the lead going from 13 to 4 in that one poll?
Well, you think two things. One is you think it's terrible, but you also think that there's probably some outlier going on either on the upside or the downside there. But keep in mind, you also know that Obama was up by 1 at this stage in the race against Romney and ended up winning by a relative landslide. So a 4-point lead is still a very sizable lead in the national poll, and I don't think they're panicking at all about that. I do think that they're concerned, significantly concerned about what's gone on since then.
I just interject one thing on the polling. We're getting to the silly season where the mechanics of traditional polling are becoming incredibly hard. What I believe the Clinton campaign is doing is more of a CRM relationship with voters they've identified to make sure their army is holding, less than trying a lot of random phone polling. Because the truth is you can't get through on the phone to half the quotas you need anymore. So the tubes in the radar set, all this polling we're all obsessed with, are sparking now at the end of the election. It's hard to do.
Matt, let me ask you if Hillary Clinton gave you a call tomorrow morning, again, assuming that we don't have a lot of new information by tomorrow morning, she said, Matt, what should I do? Just broadly speaking, can we afford at this moment to go into a prevent defense, or a four corners offense, either way? Or do we need to somehow be out there aggressively making some kind of case to counter this information flow?
Well, I think I would advise her to do basically what she did today. Leave the wrangling over the Comey thing to aides and go out and make her closing argument the way she was planning to do it. I think it was smart of her not to comment in the clip that you showed at the top of the show about this, because what is she going to say? There really isn't any information out there. And I don't think she can go to the bunker here at all. I think she's got to be out and working aggressively.
Mike, they obviously had a full schedule of plans of things to do with celebrities and in battleground states. She's going to Arizona. Should they just basically act like nothing's going on and she should just continue her schedule as is, or does she need to address it somehow?
Well, I think for the next 48 hours, they ought to jump on the ride of let's hear everything, FBI. Come on.
Right, but out of her mouth?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. Look, this is the dominant story now. Either be part of it or look totally clueless. I think some of these nuances of...
So if you worked for her, you'd say in a rally, you need to stand up and say, how dare the FBI do this?
No. See, that's
Don't pick a fight with them. Okay.
Pushing back.
So what's the right lines?
I want total transparency. I want FBI Director Comey to explain exactly what they're looking at. We'll cooperate in all ways. I'm totally confident.
Let's see all of Anthony's emails.
Yeah, grab it, own it, repeat the old apology, and then pivot to the other stuff in 72 hours once the fire's burned out. You cannot pretend this won't be a fire for 72 hours. Own the media. Get in that story.
I predict she won't talk about it, Matt.
I think you're right. That's my prediction, too, but it's not what I do.
I mean, she might. I think if she does it all, it'll be in a tarmac or airplane availability. I cannot imagine her addressing this in front of 7,000 people at a rally. That would be really weird. But she might address it if she feels it would move the ball. I do think they probably feel pretty good about the Podesta statement. They've gotten a lot of positive feedback right away on social media. I think they're probably going to keep up an aid response, at least for now.
I don't like to ever ask you to do this because I know it makes you uncomfortable when I put you in the position of advising the Trump campaign. But
you've done it a couple of times.
I've done it a few times. I find it. I don't like doing it, but I actually kind of like doing it.
You totally like it.
So there's a little discord or discontinuity or something between dissonance between Trump having trashed the FBI for months and months and months, and today now singing their praises. Is that dissonance a problem? Should he go on and just be praising the FBI right now? Does that make the most sense politically for him to be saying something totally counter to what he said about Comey 2 weeks ago?
Yes, I think there's a problem with that. I mean, I think the fundamental piece of advice Trump has needed for a year is, on occasion, shut the hell up. And that's something he's incapable of doing. That's why he's in the trouble he's in. Get out of the way and let the 1,000 knives work for 48 hours and then comment on it. But he won't do that. Instead, he will overplay his hand, soaked with adrenaline, and make himself the story probably by Monday.
It is hard to get the hood on that Falcon.
Very hard, because it's a crazy Falcon.
It's certainly got some talons on it. All right, Matt Bennett, Mike Murphy, thank you guys for being on the show. It's always a pleasure. More on this story. And also, we'll talk a little bit about Joe Biden's crazy week when we get back.
Joining us now from Trump Tower, Donald Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, an attorney and a close observer of this story. Kellyanne, you're a good reporter and you're a lawyer, and this got a lot of self-interest here. So tell me what you think James Comey's statement means.
It means that he was in a very tough spot, Mark. If he had sat on this information and let the election go by and it was revealed later, people would cry foul. They would say, that's not fair. We had a right to know. And I think he did the right thing by putting out the statement, sending the letter to the 8 congressional chairmen. And we'll see where this leads. I mean, I think the Clinton campaign's in a very tough spot. They privately and publicly criticized Comey for having that press conference on July 5th, even though they agreed with his result in not choosing to indict her. But then he went on to say she had been reckless and careless. He testified before Congress. Everybody sees you in the shot, in the screen when he's testifying, talking about under oath how she didn't have one server, she had 13. She destroyed emails. There were confidential emails on there. There was national security information on there. So this just is the next chapter in all of that, and we'll see where it leads. But I think it does play into what people's reluctance about Hillary Clinton already is. They don't trust her. They don't much like her, and this doesn't help for somebody who is calling on Comey today, ironically, to be transparent and be honest and have full disclosure and immediacy. She's never practiced that herself, particularly when it comes to the first investigation. I just think many Americans will say, how many times have my friends and neighbors been under FBI investigation? If the answer is 2, your neighbor is Hillary Clinton. People know this isn't normal unless there's a there.
So, Kellyanne, just in your answer just now and earlier today on your Twitter feed, you obviously took a shot at the Podesta statement for being kind of inconsistent or hypocritical in terms of calling for a full disclosure.
I agreed with him.
Well, okay, so that's my question. You had a little bit of a barb there. But my question is just as a matter of what would you like to see Director Comey do now? Would you like to see him come forward in the next 24 hours and explain exactly what this is all about?
Well, I have a sense of humor on Twitter and elsewhere. I know that's difficult for some people to swallow. However, and I will continue to, it's not for me to say what Director Comey should do. He is the FBI, and I want to just remind everybody, because I think it's a very tough day for Team Clinton and their supporters, including in the mainstream media, because the FBI is not the RNC. It's not the Trump campaign. It's not the vast right-wing conspiracy. It is the FBI, and it is not for me to say what he should do next. I appreciate the fact that given the information he had, he decided to go forward with it. Why do I appreciate the fact? Because I'm an American who loves this country and the principles of American democracy and believes that he should come forward when he has information like that and not let 11 days till the election get in his way. That's an artificial timeline. I also think what's going to happen in the next couple days is responsible people will be asking down-ballot Democrats how they feel about this, just the way down-ballot Republicans are asked about every A, B, and C about Donald Trump. So it's an important issue, I think, up and down the Democratic Party, and it just plays into I heard Mike Murphy offering his advice on Operation Falcon. I'll take that under advisement. But in addition to that, when you look attitudinally at undecided voters, it's very clear that part of what makes them undecided at this point is they do not want to vote for Hillary Clinton. Right. They've already made that decision. So the question is, won't this push them further away from her? Probably so.
But Kellyanne, let me come back to my question. Your candidate and your campaign were free with criticism for Director Comey when he laid out his case against Hillary Clinton, which was damning, and then just declined to prosecute. You guys have said on multiple occasions he should have, on the basis of the evidence, prosecuted her, right? Indicted her. In this case, you're saying,
majority of Americans agreed.
But in this case, you're saying I can't say what I want the FBI director to do. Previously, we said he should have indicted her. Now I can't say. So I'm just asking again, would you like him to be fully transparent or not?
John, that's an easy one. You're asking me to judge hours after learning about this separate investigation, what Director Comey can do versus him having a press conference. And we all knew 33,000 emails had been deleted. We already know that they weren't all about yoga recipes and girl talk with her girlfriends and her daughter. We already know that she had violated what was told that she could and could not do at the State Department. You're asking me, the two aren't comparable. You're asking me to judge an investigation that just happened.
I'm not asking you to judge.
You know what I wanted to do?
Kellyanne.
We wanted to do his job.
I'm not asking you to judge. I'm not asking you to judge any investigation. I'm just asking you whether you're for him being fully transparent or not. That's all I'm asking.
I'm for him doing his job, and I'm for him having a result that's consistent with what he finds in the evidence. And I'll leave it there. I realize it's a very tough day for those who had already taken the champagne bottles off the shelf and uncorked them, calling no path left. The race is over. The polls are disastrous. The polls are not disastrous. Pre-FBI investigation announcement today, as you pointed out earlier, as Mark did, we went from -12 in the ABC Washington Post poll to -4. I predict that polls like that will continue to tighten, and we already see it in our internal polling. And we actually, Mr. Trump is just going to continue to take his case directly to the voters, and I'm sure Secretary Clinton will just ignore this issue as she does so many others.
Kellyanne, I just correct you the mistake that a lot of people make. Comey did not have a press conference. He made a public statement. He didn't take any questions from the press on this that announcement, which was less than transparent.
He certainly incurred the wrath of people right, left, and center by doing
Do you know when and how Mr. Trump learned about this development?
He learned about it when the rest of us did, and it sounds like the White House and the Clinton campaign were in the same boat. I read a couple of reports that the White House found out about it through media reports. Same thing for Mr. Trump.
I'm just wondering what his initial, if you know what his initial reaction was to it.
Well, his initial reaction was, wow. And of course, you know, you've been showing, and he came out with a statement pretty quickly because he was in New Hampshire for a campaign event. He'll be in 3 states today, very typical for him, with lots of thousands and thousands of voters at his rallies, not hundreds and hundreds. But the fact is that for him, he's been way ahead of this for a long time. Other cable stations are playing him talking about October 17th of this year, July 27th, I believe, when he was at the Doral. He made a statement. You played it, and I think that's important. He's always ahead of the curve, even when people just denounce him and get all high-minded and angry about where's his evidence of that. He's pretty much ahead of the curve.
Will this be your main message from him in the campaign for the foreseeable future? No.
No, not at all. No, not at all. In fact, he just gave his second of 3 speeches today, Mark, and he mentions it at the beginning, and then he gives an entire speech. He's talking about repealing and replacing Obamacare. He's talking about his 9 or 10-point plan for his first 100 days, his reform package. So anybody who thinks that he's only talking about that is not paying attention to his speeches and taking a 45-second snippet.
Do you have a TV ad in the works on this?
Well, we have lots of TV ads about corruption and about.
But I mean specifically on this development.
Well, we've had scripts suggested to us today, and our fundraising is off the charts yet again. I mean, our small dollar fundraising is incredible, and at moments like this, it spikes through the roof, which they just told me upstairs is happening again. I think that Obamacare on the collapse, our small dollar fundraising, the $10 million check that Mr. Trump gave to his campaign this morning, I witnessed it myself, the tightening polls, and of course, us just going to leave it all in the field and take the case directly to the voters, including in states that I think the Clinton team already thinks they have wrapped up. We're going to win this race, but we were going to win it before the FBI's decision today. And this just, I think, will sow further doubt, unrelated to us at all, about Hillary Clinton's fitness for office. You can't have national security briefings. You can't have access to information if you've already proven to put all of us at risk along those same lines as Secretary of State, unfit and unqualified to be president.
Kellyanne, I just want to ask you to respond to a story that our colleagues wrote yesterday in Bloomberg Business Week, Josh Green and Sasha Eisenberg, who quote a senior official from your campaign saying, quote, "We have 3 major voter suppression operations underway within the Trump campaign," and then goes on to detail what those 3 are. Is that true?
No. That person misspoke and used a phrase that's not true. I think it's Hillary Clinton trying to suppress our voters. But no, that is not true.
Right. So the details that are offered in that piece, which are go into a fair amount of detail, you're saying it's that there's no effort to suppress any kind of vote on the Democratic side coming out of your campaign.
No, what we're doing here is what the Clinton campaign is doing and all campaigns do, which is we're trying to touch voters with different messages, customized to what we know about them analytically and through our sophisticated modeling systems. But anybody who wants to vote and can vote should go and vote. I'll tell you about that, though. We get reports. I just had one upstairs 2 or 3 hours ago. We get daily reports on the early voting absentee balloting, and we feel very comfortable and very confident about the returns we're seeing compared to where President Obama and Governor Romney were at this stage, this exact date, in fact, in 2012. We think that those early investments in early voting absentee balloting are really paying off.
All right, Kellyanne, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you making time for us at what is a very busy moment for you, no doubt. We'll be right back.
Continuing to track this breaking story regarding FBI Director Comey's statement. So I'm just wondering what you thought of Kellyanne Conway's posture towards Comey.
Well, I couldn't quite understand, actually, why she would not answer the direct question I kept asking her, which was, you know, I mean, it's totally inconsistent to say they had an opinion about what Comey should have done on the question of bringing an indictment or not, and they're entitled to express that opinion. But now, we can't have an opinion about
I think her point was back then we had a lot of facts, and now, like everyone else, they don't have a lot of facts.
Yeah, but I'm not asking her. But I was not asking her to rule on this. I was asking her to say, you know, is she in favor of transparency or not? Which at this moment, as you pointed out earlier, lots of conservatives, lots of liberals, lots of centrists right now who are all saying Comey needs to be more transparent. Yeah. I think the Trump campaign. I mean, I know that there's some danger in that because he might come out and it might not work to their advantage politically, but just as a matter of principle, it seems to me that they should be for him being transparent, neutrally transparent.
So it's late on a Friday. Yeah. FBI, I think, shut down for the weekend.
Yeah. As you said, we don't know what Comey is. Yeah. Could be fishing by now.
I mean, if Comey stays silent, this thing seems to me to just be a wildfire all the way through Monday.
It does. I cannot imagine. I mean, look, Comey's behavior, as we've said, has been hard to parse for months now. But the pressure on him over in the coming hours to say something more, I think, is going to be intense. That was the only thing I can predict.
Incredible. Incredible if he says nothing. Incredible if he says something.
Yes.
All right, we'll come back. We'll tell you what you're doing on Sunday night right after this.
Boy.
Before we go, Democrat candidate Tim Kaine, the vice president's nominee, says to Vice News this evening that the timing of the new FBI probe involving Clinton's email server is, quote, very, very troubling. Keep refreshing BloombergPolitics.com for the latest developments on this big FBI Clinton story. We're also, this weekend, on Sunday night, going to explore this topic as well as Joe Biden on The Circus, our Showtime documentary series produced in conjunction with Bloomberg Politics. Sunday night, 8 Eastern Time, Biden and the latest on this story. Next on Bloomberg Technology, we'll have an update on this story. Until tomorrow, or Monday, thanks for watching. Sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's begin with a check of first word news. Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, says the FBI should provide details about newly discovered emails the Bureau's investigating. He was responding to a letter from FBI Director James Comey informing Congress the emails will be reviewed to determine whether they contain classified information. In July, the FBI concluded a probe of Clinton's use of a private server while she was Secretary of State. We'll have more on this story coming up. The United Nations Human Rights Office says Islamic State militants are using tens of thousands of Iraqi civilians as human shields. The UN says it's occurring in and around Mosul, where Iraqi and U.S.-led coalition forces are attempting to drive militants from the city. Russia, which has been accused of war crimes in Syria, has been voted off the UN Human Rights Council. Russia lost its regional seat to Hungary and Croatia. Spain's parliament is set to confirm Mariano Rajoy as Prime Minister on Saturday. The caretaker leader lost a confidence vote on Thursday. Tomorrow, Rajoy's Socialist Party rivals have agreed to abstain in the second vote. That should give him a simple majority. Rajoy's been acting Prime Minister for 10 months because no party could gather enough votes to form a government. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg Technology is next.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, more emails come back to haunt Hillary Clinton. A new FBI inquiry throws the controversy back into the presidential race. Plus, a tech earnings bonanza this week. Some of the industry's biggest names reporting. We'll take a look at the winners and the losers. And after Qualcomm and NXP announced the biggest deal in the chip industry's history, Intel's president of the Internet of Things gives us his take on the future of computing. But first, to a rapidly developing story. U.S. stocks took a hit on Friday afternoon after the FBI reopened its investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while serving as Secretary of State. FBI Director James Comey said in a letter to Congress, quote, in connection with an unrelated case, the FBI has learned of the existence of emails that appear to be pertinent to the investigation. That case, we've learned, is a probe of Clinton aide Huma Abedin's estranged husband, former Representative Anthony Weiner, who's being investigated for sending illicit texts to an underage girl. Joining us now for more, Bloomberg's With All Due Respect anchors Mark Halperin and John Heilman. Mark and John, first of all, what is your take on just how consequential this new information actually is, given that the FBI is releasing this 11 days before the election?
Well, the timing makes it potentially very consequential, but we don't know enough about what actually is going on here to say whether or not it will be as consequential as it could be, potentially because of the timing. This is still a story with a lot of ambiguity. As we know, right now, the reporting seems to suggest that what the FBI is looking at are not email that were sent from Hillary Clinton's private server, from her private server, but that is connected, as you said, Emily, to the Anthony Weiner case. So, again, over the course of the next 24, 48 hours, we'll hopefully know a lot more than we know right now and be able to take its political measure a little bit better.
Now, Hillary Clinton has retweeted Chairman John